The internet is full of all kinds of interesting things. Some of these things are helpful, some not so much. The website thetop10s.com isn't helpful, but it is entertaining. Through online voting, this site generates a top list for everything from the top 10 battles in history to the top 10 house pets. When the site surveyed people about the top 10 biggest pet peeves, here were some of the answers. Number 3, people who have bad driving etiquette. Number 7, when someone else imitates you. Number 10, screaming children having temper tantrums. And the number 1, most annoying, pet peeve, when people chew with their mouth open. But do you know what's interesting about that list? Everything on it is about what other people do. There was nothing on this top 10 list that said things like, when I oversleep my alarm, or when I gossip about a coworker for no reason at all, when I lose my temper with my kids. Nope. It was all about someone else. If you and I had enough time, actually it probably wouldn't take very long at all, we could create our own top 10 list of things that annoy us. And chances are good that they would all follow the same pattern. Our complaints would all involve other people and what they do or don't do. Now, pet peeves are one thing, but it's a different story when something goes from annoying to hurtful. Like when you hear from a mutual friend that your best friend was talking about you behind your back. Or when a roommate intentionally excludes you from their plans. Or when your spouse takes a cheap shot in a heated argument. Whether it's by someone close to you or just an acquaintance, we all know what it feels like to be hurt by other people. And while we could avoid that kind of relational pain in a perfect world, the truth is these kinds of things will happen. It's inevitable. And when these moments happen, we face a decision. How are we going to respond? If I had to guess, since I've started talking about relational hurts, you've probably had a current situation or hurt come to mind. You may have even noticed a physical reaction. Your heart rate may have increased. Your blood pressure may have gone up. Maybe you got irritated. Maybe you started thinking about all the ways you've been wronged by this one person or any person who has ever hurt you. You started to feel sorry for yourself. You began rehearsing your side of the story in your mind. And this is completely normal. But did you notice that all of these things have one thing in common? You! They're all about how you feel, how you've been wronged, and your side of the story. And we can all relate. No matter our age, stage of life, professional status, or relational status, we all have a singular perspective, our own. When we get angry or get hurt, we focus our attention on ourselves because we want ourselves to feel better. And that makes sense. No one likes to feel miserable. But if you've ever spent much time stewing on something that hurt you or dwelling on a situation that frustrated you, you know that feeling better is the opposite of what happens. Instead, the more time we spend thinking about the offense, the more fired up we get. And when we get to that point, we're in danger of doing something we'll regret, either now or later. But there's a different, more constructive, more beneficial way to handle hurt, and it's found in the book of Proverbs. Like we've mentioned, most of the book of Proverbs is attributed to King Solomon, who was known as the wisest man who ever lived. And wisdom is generally a result of life experience, which usually means that someone learned the hard way. And Solomon's intention when he shared his Proverbs was to help other people gain wisdom before they made the same mistakes. So, on the topic of being hurt, he shared this. A person's wisdom yields patience. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. Let's look at the first part of this verse. Before he addresses offense, he says a person's wisdom leads to patience. And he's not talking about the kind of patience required to wait for your Amazon delivery or to wait in line at the DMV. Solomon is talking about being patient with people. In this case, patience means slowing down, taking a moment or a few moments, and then responding to someone who has hurt you. It doesn't mean you ignore your hurt feelings or allow people to take advantage of you. It's about learning to take a minute, take a breath, and step away without immediately going into attack mode. In this way, patience is slowing down your reaction. Here's one way to develop patience in responding to others. Consider what might be going on in someone else's life. In other words, when a friend talks about you behind your back, consider what might be going on in their own lives to make them feel they have to talk about you to gain acceptance with someone else. Or when your roommate excludes you from plans, take into account his insecurity of being the new guy in a new city and his need to establish his own social circle. When your spouse says something hurtful in an argument, take into account the stress they're under and the pain they feel that made them lash out in that way. In other words, overlooking an offense means not just looking past what's happening to you right now, but also looking toward what else might be happening in a person's life. It's learning to see yourself as a part of the story, but not the whole story. Simply put, a wise person can see beyond the immediate circumstances and beyond themselves. Anytime you learn to do that, you're well on your way to finding more peace and less stress in your relationships. This doesn't make you numb to what you experienced. You'll still feel the hurt relational issues can cause, but you'll no longer see your hurt as the whole story. And when your perspective changes, other things change as well. You'll find yourself able to stay calmer and more empathetic. Wisdom gives you patience. Understanding a situation gives you patience. And wise people are patient people with themselves and with others. Which makes the opposite true as well. Unwise people are impatient people. An unwise person is someone who believes they know best. They're convinced they're the central character to both their story and everyone else's story. They think they know what should happen in any and every circumstance. They try to maneuver and manipulate their way into control. They believe that they know how and when things should happen. And when you think you know what's best for you and those around you, you'll be frustrated until you either get your way or they get what they deserve. And that's a miserable and exhausting way to live. But more than that, it's a small way to live because this thought keeps you focused on yourself. Unwise, impatient people are people whose world is all about them. It's also important to remember that God isn't just thinking about you. Yes, He has His eye on you and your hurt, but He's also thinking about the person who hurt you, which is why the proverb continues this way. It is to one's glory to overlook an offense. That's a pretty big statement. It's to your glory to overlook something or someone who's annoying you, which isn't typically what we think. We think that overlooking someone else's failure is to their glory, like they're getting away with something. And because we feel that way, our internal sense of justice is set off. It doesn't seem right or fair or okay. But Solomon was saying your ability to overlook an offense isn't about the other person. This time, it is about you. It's to your glory to consider the other person's circumstances. Overlooking the offense elevates you, but in the right way, not as a victim, but as a person able and willing to take the high road. Even more, you don't just look your best, you actually become a better version of yourself, a wiser version. And the opposite is true too. When you refuse to overlook an offense, you will look worse. When you dwell on an offense, you will feel worse, and you will be the person who hurts the most. It will consume your mind and dominate your emotions. But overlooking an offense sets you free from the emotional control an outside circumstance can have on you. Now, all of this sounds great in theory, right? Until we're actually asked to do it. In the real world, overlooking an offense seems naive and foolish, not to mention impossible. So, how do we do this in real life? Here are a few things to keep in mind. It starts with understanding that everybody has a story. Nobody does hurtful things for no reason. There's something or a lot of things in their life history that has led them to this moment. When we take the focus off ourselves, we're more likely to see this. When people say or do things that hurt you, quite often it's not personal. It's not even about you. You just happen to be on the receiving end. Hurt people hurt people. So usually the offense doesn't happen because they're out to get you. Because remember, we aren't the center of every story. Sometimes people have things going on that you and I could never imagine. Learning to be generous with our thoughts and actions towards people in these moments not only extends grace to them, but also molds you into a more grace-filled, wisdom-filled person. It's vital that we learn to believe the most generous story about other people, that we make positive, empathetic assumptions instead of assuming they're being malicious. So learn as much as you can about someone's story. That's how we become wise. That's how we make life less about ourselves. That's how we grow in glory. Remember this, patient people know there's more to the story. Doing this helps everyone involved, both now and later. This week, think about that one person in that one situation who bothers you. And then think about their story. What do you think they're going through? And how might that experience be affecting them? Then practice shifting the story from being about you to being about them and what they might have going on. Practice patience, practice wisdom, practice widening your perspective. You may be surprised what you end up learning as a result. Imagine practicing this idea enough that you became a patient person. Imagine taking the time to consider other people's hurts and how their stories may be affecting their words and actions. I bet it would change how you think about and how you respond to being hurt. And then imagine if the people in your life did the same thing for you. What if the people around you, like your significant other, your friends, your children, your coworkers, or your neighbors, chose to take a breath, slow down, and hear your side of the story before reacting? What if they considered what you're going through? What if they recognized that you too have a story that informs how you live? And what if they considered your story when considering your behavior? It would matter, wouldn't it? You'd feel heard, recognized, maybe even understood. And when we all take time to learn someone else's story, it's good for everyone involved, both now and later.